You can now hear Movie Heaven, Movie Hell on Stitcher. Stitcher is radio on demand. Listen anytime, anywhere. Stitcher is an award-winning free app that lets you listen to all your favourite shows, plus discover from 20,000 news, entertainment and sports shows. You can also create your own custom playlists. Stitcher is available on iOS, Android, Nook, iPad and in over 4 million car dashboards. It's on demand and it's on the go. No downloading, no syncing, no wasted memory. You can stream your favourite podcasts from Stitcher. Don't have Stitcher? Download it free today at Stitcher.com or in the App Store. And please leave us a review and rating on Stitcher. Thank you. Welcome to Movie Heaven, Movie Hell with me, Simon Aitken, and
I'm Keith Eyles, and we're both independent filmmakers and lifelong fans of cinema and related media. And for this podcast extra, we're happy to be joined by our friend and filmmaker, Clive Ashenden. Welcome, Clive.
Hello, very happy to be here talking about horror movies. Oh, spoilers.
Yeah. Specifically, FrightFest 2016, which was just this past weekend. So we thought we'd do a quick podcast extra to tell you a little bit about the highlights, etc. from that.
Yeah, we couldn't watch everything, but we did our darndest, didn't we?
We did.
Well, I didn't. Yes, as everybody who listens to this show knows, I said I wouldn't be attending, and it was kind of half true. I actually turned up at the venue, but I only got to see one film. I didn't have a ticket for the whole event, so I was there sort of Friday for a little bit, and then Saturday for a little bit, and then most of Sunday and Monday. But my time there, I got to see one film which wasn't very good.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Well, I mean, as usual, it was a bit of a mixed bag. But you know, that's the good thing. That is kind of the beauty of horror, really, is the amount of variety that you get, because obviously there are lots of subgenres and mixed genres and films from all over the world of various budgets and types in there. So you know, there's always, I think it's always going to be a mixed bag when it comes to, you know, watching this many movies over a long weekend. And of course, for this one, we had a new venue as well. So it was a slightly different vibe to previous Fright Fests, even though it's only my fourth one. But I know from your point of view, Clive, you've been doing it for bloody years, haven't you? So what did you think of the new venue?
On the whole, I thought it was really really good. I really enjoyed it. I mean, the fact that it was in Shepherd's Bush made it have a very different feel. And what was nice was basically the whole cinema got taken over by FrightFesters. There weren't any normals there. You know, it was just people watching horror movies the whole time. And that was great. So we kind of had our own little shopping centre to ourselves, rather like Dawn of the Dead. So I really enjoyed that side of it, and I liked everything at that particular view cinema. Everything is all on the one level, and it was nice and sort of spread out, and they didn't really they got quite a wide kind of atrium area, so it meant that even when it was sort of busy, you were able to sort of get through all the groups of people without fighting, you know, or sort of jostling with people, and that was really nice. I mean, on the downside, there wasn't really because you weren't in Leicester Square, there wasn't that area outside where you could congregate and really talk about stuff, because basically you were on the main road, and also because we were not near Notting Hill, there was a bit of a sort of spillover with the carnival, which meant that when you came out of the screenings very late at night, the atmosphere was a little bit charged and a bit dicey at times. on the street. You had to. It felt a little bit dangerous, but
I'm not sure which was more horrific.
Well, there we go. Yeah.
What did you think of the new venue, Keith?
Yeah, it definitely had a different vibe. I mean, I managed, my first year was the last year at the Empire in the big screen when everybody was all together. So I experienced kind of the last year of that. And then obviously the previous 2 years have been at the View in Leicester Square. This one obviously being at the View in Shepherd's Bush, it did have a different feel and vibe to it, but different didn't necessarily mean better or worse. It just meant different. And I thought the actual screens themselves were great. You know, to be fair, the View Cinema staff, you know, conducted everything quite well, I thought, generally. And it was nice to have, you know, plenty of variety of places to go eat between the films. This year, one of the things they did do very well was the sort of pacing in terms of you had enough gap between films to actually, you know, go and have something to eat and have a proper break, rather than the sort of mad panic to get from one film to another, which I experienced a few times in Leicester Square. But yeah, I think it worked well. And you know, some people had problems with it. Obviously, you know, there were some of the regulars, if you like, that weren't there for the duration this year. But most of the faces that we're used to seeing at FrightFest turned up, even if it was only for a day.
You're not mean like Mike Tack turning up on the last day then?
Yeah, well, Mike Tack turned up on the last day. It was good to see him. Obviously, Jason Braun was there for the duration. My good friend Graham Curry was there. You know, and Andrew Lunn I saw briefly. I think he was only there on the first day, perhaps. But you know, and I'm going to be terrible now because I've started mentioning names, and there's going to sure to be people that I've not mentioned that I should have. But there were a lot of people there.
I will just say, throwing in my own sixpence worth, that we sorely missed a place we could congregate afterwards, like say like the Imperial or the Phoenix.
So the Weatherspoons there didn't cut it for you then, Simon?
It was nice, but there wasn't. Well, the thing is, we're used to having like the after show party on the last day where we all congregate at the Phoenix and we're there till like, you know, 4 or 5 in the morning.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
This year they had a lock-in at the View which finished at 12 o'clock, and I know some people went to the Ibis Hotel nearby, but nobody knew that there wasn't like an open invite to it. It was, you know, it was only those in the know.
Right. Yeah. I must admit, I've never experienced that. I must shout out as well. Sorry, I said I missed people, didn't I?
You did.
Jason Finn, thank you so much, Jason Finn. He was there, and very kindly bought, well, you and me, Simon, wasn't it? Dinner one evening,
yes,
which
did.
Was completely unexpected, and I'm very grateful of him doing that. So thank you, Jason. If you're there and you're like, he didn't mention me, damn it. there's a load more, I'm sure.
Yes. So as the selection of films this year, what was the general consensus? Was it a good year, bad year, a so-so year?
I would say it was one of those, it was a consistent year. And what I mean by that is that, you know, whereas some years you get some absolutely outstanding films and some absolute, you know, appalling films, from what I saw, and you know, I didn't see everything, obviously, but, you know, most things were of a fairly decent standard, I felt. What do you think, Clive?
I'd say it was a good year. I don't think there was any. I don't think it was necessarily like it being like a landmark year. You know, there are occasional years where you feel like there are like one or two or even, you know, occasionally 3 sort of films where you think, okay, that's going to be like a classic in upcoming years. We've seen things together now for the first time, which are going to sort of be important in genre. And although we saw some very good films, I don't know that we necessarily saw anything like that sort of earth-shattering. But not to say I didn't see films I enjoyed, because I did.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of talk about the opening night not being, again, I've only got sort of 4 years to draw off of, but a lot of people felt that the opening night maybe wasn't as strong as it is sometimes. There was a big sort of Hollywood film on the opening night, a film called Cell, which is based on a Stephen King novel and starred John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson. And it was one of those films where it started off extremely good, and 2/3 of it was really strong. But then, and I found this with a few Stephen King adaptations, sometimes the last third for me, I kind of lost it slightly, and I think that was a consensus with most people.
I don't know that I'd agree with you that it's a big Hollywood film, because I think it's actually quite low budget. But I would agree that it started quite well, and it was ultimately a little bit disappointing. But
yeah, I meant when I said Hollywood, I mean it. The one with the big names in it. The Cusacks and Samuel L. Jacksons, as opposed to people we've never heard of or seen on television or whatever. But yeah. I mean, it was kind of. It was just mediocre, unfortunately, and it's a shame because it started so well, but it just didn't quite deliver at the end.
So, was there any big stars there this year?
No, not really. There were a lot of filmmakers that came over.
But your favourite, Dominic Monaghan was there.
Like I said, not really. But no, yes, you're right. Dominic Monaghan was probably the biggest name. He was in a film called Pet, which screened on the second day, I believe. And he came to basically introduce it and do a Q&A afterwards. And I thought that was, that was one of the stronger films of the festival, actually. I thought that was very, very good, very well done. And good to have him there supporting it, I guess.
But no, big guest of the year. Then there's no big, because last year we had Barbara Crampton, and the year before that we had Robert Englund.
No, yeah, I think another sort of change this year is you had the headline sponsor changed to Horror Channel, and also with the move out of Leicester Square, I think that did maybe affect how they could sort of attract the big name guests, if you see what I mean. But at the same time, they had this whole PR thing going on where there's this new sort of partnership with Screen International, where Screen International were giving me a lot of international coverage, and there was this new award for Rising Horror Star.
Okay.
Who did that go to? I have no idea who that even went to.
It went to the sort of star and director of Prevenge, Alice Lowe from Sightseers.
Okay.
Right, but that film's not finished yet, is it?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Because she was pregnant when she made it, hence Prevenge, right?
Yes, it's a revenge movie where a heavily pregnant lady is doing the revenging.
Okay.
And it's like a comedic sort of horror thriller, I think.
Right.
But hopefully we'll see that next year at FrightFest.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there were some films that were very inspiring there from the point of view of they had the filmmakers present, and some of them were people that had been to FrightFest previous years, weren't necessarily filmmakers, and decided to get off their backsides and make something, and actually got it got it screened. And anybody who can do that, we all know, us three in particular, how difficult it is to get stuff made. And anybody that achieves that, I've got to take my hat off to. Even if I think, even if I watch the film and I find bits of it, amateurish or mistakes in it or things of that nature, the fact that they even got it made and got it screened is an achievement. So there were a few films like that across the board this year. Which, as I say, I have to compliment the filmmakers for doing that, because the green-eyed monster definitely sets in when you see someone up there with a feature on the main screen, particularly when, as I'd mentioned on a previous podcast, I actually submitted the last short that I did, and sadly it didn't get accepted. So anyone who can get it in there, I'm impressed by.
Yeah. So guys, what were your picks from the festival? What films did you like?
Clive, do you want to go first?
Okay. How do you want to do this? Do you want a top 5, top 3? What do you want?
Well, just what films stood out for you? It doesn't matter how many.
Okay. I guess the ones that stood out for me most were Beyond the Gates, directed by Jackson Stewart, which is very much a sort of love letter to 80s horror, and in particular to sort of Stuart Gordon of kind of Reanimator and From Beyond sort of periods. And it's this whole thing about these two estranged brothers who come back together after their father's sort of disappearance to sort of clear out his old like video and DVD emporium and find find one of those old VHS like board games they used to do, things like Atmosphere, and only this one's called Beyond the Gates. And when you put it into the thing, and they discovered that it's just the last thing that their dad was playing before he disappeared. And so what you get is basically almost like a horror riff on Jumanji.
Oh, okay.
And so they put the tape in, and lo, who appears? Barbara Crampton.
Yeah.
And of course we all want that to happen, don't we? When we put a VHS in.
Absolutely. Especially Mike Tack. But no, I was going to say as well on that note, that too is one of the standout ones for me. And I think, it was clearly a labor of love by the filmmakers. And, they obviously, grew up in that same generation that we all did, with the 80s horror films and whatever. But they really used their imagination. I mean, I thought the imagination behind this and behind telling this story was really, really well done. So, yeah, good pick, Clive. I'd agree with you 100% on that one.
All right. Keith, what was a pick for you?
Well, just look at. I really enjoyed a film. It was shown on the last day, and I knew nothing about it, and went in to see it, called Director's Cut. And the reason, I mean, this was right up my alley in so much as it's set up as if you're watching a film with audio commentary.
Oh, okay.
And the guy is sort of talking you through the film and explaining why he is going to make various changes to the film that we're watching. Okay, and you kind of go with it. Again, in terms of using imagination, this is very well thought through. And basically, it turns out that this guy is kind of an obsessed stalker with the main actress in the film, and kind of ends up re-editing and even reshooting some of the film to kind of get close to this actress. And it's very amusing and very clever, and just the thing about it is all of the things he kind of adds are cheesy as hell. However, the actual film behind it is a really well-made film. So, you have to sort of admire the craft of what they did with this. And apparently this film was entirely made through crowdfunding. And they had at the end a list of, it must have been well over 1,000 people that had donated to get this made. But I don't want to say too much about it because it will ruin it, but I hope it gets a release. Director's cut is a really good, fun horror comedy adventure.
Didn't it have Penn and Teller in it?
That's correct.
It did. The in quotes director who's doing the commentary and who's stalking the lead actress Missy Pyle is Penn Jillette himself. So yeah, I mean, I absolutely concur with what you're saying there, Keith. I mean, it's very funny. Also, very good to see Harry Hamlin. In a film.
Yes.
So, but yeah, and I liked Lynn Shay's cameo.
Yes, they got Lynn Shay in there as the police captain. But it was really good because, as I said, it's supposed to be this film called Knocked Off about a serial killer that copies serial killers from the past, and they're investigating that. And then, as I said, he's kind of redone this film, but it's very clever what they've done with it, and it really works, and it really plays on the whole, anybody that makes movies and listens to commentaries and all of that, it ticks all of those boxes because it is done very well while still making fun out of it as well.
Oh, so definitely up your street.
It was great. I really enjoyed it. You go into some of these things. This is what I do enjoy about FrightFest. I tend not. I know, Clive, you're pretty good at researching stuff prior to. I tend with FrightFest to just turn up and watch stuff and not really know anything about it. And this was one of those films that completely took me by surprise. In fact, that last day was a strong day because there was also another sort of low budget independent film called Monolith, which was about a futuristic car and a mother and her child on this sort of adventure. And again, I knew nothing about this going into it, and I found that quite an enjoyable film also.
Clive, what was another pick for you?
I'm going to have to sort of flag up the obvious one, and that's Train to Busan, the closing night film. It had been sort of touted as the sort of biggest hit of its sort of territory ever. This sort of, I guess, Korean answer to World War Z, where it's this story of this father and his daughter on this train that's full of like viral type sort of 28 days later zombies, and it's just it not only is a really good action movie with some incredibly spectacular sequences and some bits which sort of remind you of The Raid and things like that. It's also a film with a lot of heart, and it's one of those films where it actually takes a lot of time to really sort of establish all the characters involved, so you really care about everyone, and it keeps making non-Hollywood type choices in terms of who's going to die, who's going to survive, and it was one of those films where at the end people were crying, because they were really moved by it. It's a massive thrill ride is the main thing of it, but it is actually quite moving at the end.
Yeah, no, I agree. Also, I mean, this was went down really well on the last night. I mean, we've got a zombie apocalypse taking place on a fast-moving train, right? Which is a great concept in itself. But the thing is, you wouldn't actually believe that in that kind of film you would invest and care so much for the ensemble of characters that are really well set up in this. And obviously, because it's a Korean film, nobody that really stands out as being somebody that we know that they're obviously going to be the hero or they're going to be the villain or whatever. But also, like Clive said, sort of juxtaposing a lot of those tropes as well, and it was really moving. And to think that it's moving, you're watching a film in a foreign language, reading subtitles, yet you are still that invested in those characters and that moved by those characters. So that was a real surprise. Yes, a real surprise. And everybody I spoke to liked that one. I mean, I know Jason and Graham really loved it. Mike Tack said that, I texted him and he said he thought it was fantastic as well. So that was a really smart one to end the festival on, and a real surprise. Yeah, a real surprise.
So a much better ending film than last year's one, Clive.
You're gonna have to remind me what last year's ending film was, because
it was your pick for movie hell.
Oh, was it?
It was Tales of Halloween.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah.
Which I didn't think was that bad, but yeah, okay.
Wasn't that great either.
I'll tell you a film I didn't particularly enjoy this year. Again, it sounded like it would be really good. I'm just trying to think of the title of it. It's basically the one where the monster from The Ring fights the monster from The Grudge.
Sadaku versus Kayaku.
Okay, yeah. That, I was kind of hoping that would be kind of a Freddy versus Jason type thing. And God, it took a long time to get going. You basically had, a whole sort of Ring film and a whole Grudge film before the two things even met. And then when they did, it was, well, I thought somewhat of an anticlimax, to be honest. I don't know. What did you think, Clive?
I'll be honest. I took a little bit of a micro nap in that film, so that there are large gaps in my appreciation of it. I was sort of enjoying it to begin with. It's not scary in the least. It's very silly, but I was sort of enjoying its sort of, I guess, like rubbish cover versionness, if that's a thing. And then at the end, the sort of the final confrontation did make me chuckle. So, well, let's just hope there's not a follow up, because yeah.
Well, I think they're actually rebooting them, aren't they? After this, I think that's the plan again, or whatever. So. I have to mention as well another film I really enjoyed. This was right up my alley and made me smile, and I had a good time with it, as did someone else I haven't mentioned. Stuart Wright was sat in with us on this film, and I could tell he enjoyed it. Was a film called The Neighbour, which is made by the same people that made The Collector a few years back. And that was a lot of fun. It was real on the edge of your seat stuff, and again with a few twists and surprises that you don't normally expect from that type of movie. I thought that was a lot of fun also.
Well, the film I saw, which wasn't much fun, was called Downhill, and I think the title summed it up. It was by the same director that did Hidden in the Woods, which was famous for its blowjob montage. Yeah, well, Downhill was about, I call it stupid people doing stupid things. It was about a pair of downhill racers who are, they're like mountain bike riders, and they go down to Chile because their friend he's organised a race with sponsorship and stuff, and this will be the return of this rider because in a previous race his best friend died in an accident and he kind of retired from the sport, and that's all fine. And then once they get to Chile and they get up the mountain, that's when it goes really stupid. And if you find somebody who's obviously infected, the thing you do is you carry them along through the woods, especially when a group of a gang of thugs are chasing you, and there's no positive outcome for this guy. They're not going to cure him. They don't know a doctor, and it's kind of like one of those things. It's like, right, I'm going to run off and I'm going to get some help, and you're going, well, obviously you're going to die. And it just got this whole stupid thing about devil worship and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, they finally make it to a cabin, and he's on the radio, and there's a voice on the other end, and it's like, having seen so many films, when you hear a voice on the other end, it's not necessarily help.
Now, I didn't see that one, and I'm quite glad, because I've not met one person that did see it that actually liked it. Everybody said it was bad. So that's one to avoid, I guess.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what was an interesting film. It was a bonkers film, but it was quite fun. There was an Argentinian film called White Coffin, and it was really bizarre, but at the same time kind of enjoyable. You enjoyed that one, didn't you, Clive, as well? Yeah. Some people hated it. I found it divided.
I did. It really split the audience. Your friend Graham particularly loathed it. I seem to remember. And as did a couple of our neighbours who left before it finished. But I had a really good time with it. I liked that it had it went to a place you didn't really expect with the ending, and it was kind of surreal in its logic. It had a very kind of dream logic thing going on, but then it was sort of tapping into sort of magical realism and things like that. So yeah, it was one of those. It's really nice to sort of watch. You get a chance to watch horror movies from sort of different film cultures to our own, and sometimes you can get sort of used to just the conventions of British, American, Canadian, Australian sort of cinema, and then sometimes it's really refreshing just to see something which is rooted in a completely different way of viewing the world. This non sort of Western world thing, and that was a good example of that. I mean, another one I'd link to that would be The Similars, which I think which was another sort of one from South America, which is kind of like a very bizarre feature-length episode of the Twilight Zone, and it really had this sort of feel where you've got all these disparate characters trapped in this bus station in the middle of this torrential downpour, and then strange things start to happen, and it just sort of keeps amping up, and it's got one of those like almost old-fashioned-y kind of like overwrought sort of violins scores, the sort of thing you'd expect to get in a sort of 60s film. It's worth checking out if you're into trying something a bit different.
I'll tell you one film as well I quite enjoyed, although it wasn't really a horror film as such. I mean, it was more of a sci-fi film. Really, there was a film called Realive, which was done by the screenwriter who did Vanilla Sky, and it was basically about a character finds out that he's got terminal cancer and decides to freeze himself and be reanimated and reborn 80 years later, but it deals with all of the sort of psychological and emotional ramifications of that, and how that affects his loved ones and his long-term memory, and all of this. It brings to question all of that stuff. I mean, I guess there are sort of horror elements to it, and it's kind of I guess it's got a little bit of Frankenstein in there, but I actually quite enjoyed that. Our friend Zav Rodriguez, he came and he saw that one, but I'm not sure he was that keen on it really. So again,
I have to say I was a bit mixed on that one.
Were you? Okay.
Yeah. Whilst it had some really good ideas and good moments, I didn't like the fact that it was kind of Voiceover Man the movie.
Yes.
Because the lead character who becomes re-alived, as it were, he basically narrates his whole life and the whole experience, and he's such a tiresome hipster. It really wound me up. So it's rather undercut his kind of existential plight was the fact that I thought he was a bit of a prat.
Yeah, you were just jealous because they'd picked some young, good-looking, cool guy to play the main thing.
You think?
I don't know. I'm just joking. I'll tell you one we liked, Clive, that I think we should mention. I mean, obviously, there's too many, or we'll be here all night. I know, but you and we went to see that film Here Alone, which was again a survival film. The poster a viral outbreak, and it deals with a single woman survival in the wilderness, which, on one hand could sound quite boring, but on the other hand, the way they sort of structure it and they sort of mix it in with her current story and her backstory was actually done quite well, and I believe that was made on a rather modest budget as well, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, it was as much drama as it was survival horror. And I mean, it isn't just her the entire film. The other characters do come into it, and it's unless you're listening to this and you're thinking, is this just a film about someone trying to sort of strike two bits of wood together and make a fire? There's a bit more. There's a bit more to it than that. But no, it's a slow burn, but it does build up to quite a powerful climax, I thought, and it's very low budget and indie, but it is incredibly well acted, and it's all about the kind of character in that one. So I agree. I mean, that was one that was recommended to me by our friend Stuart Wright, and he was sort of spot on with that one.
Oh, so. Nice one, Stuart. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it was one of those films that was, well acted and well made. I mean, one of the things I really notice about horror films in general when they're low budget is you either find films are quite well shot and have quite good production values, but the acting and the scripting sometimes is not necessarily that great, or you have something that's a really good idea and a really good script with some, decent performances in there, but just really badly made with all sorts of production values and poor lighting and bad cinematography and problems like that. So it's always interesting. So I think when a film like this strikes that balance, as all films should, of balancing all those things well, and it actually works, it does make it sort of stand out in the crowd. And I did sort of feel that from some of the lower budget offerings, that was one of the stronger ones.
So guys, what would you say was your favourite film of the festival, and which one was like the worst film of the festival?
Movie heaven, movie hell.
Oh, okay, God. Keith, do you know?
No, I don't.
All right, I'll go first while you think then.
Go on then, yeah.
Okay, if I had to pick one, I guess my movie heaven is Beyond the Gates, which I've mentioned before. Mm-hmm. And my movie hell would be Let Her Out.
Okay, which you haven't mentioned before. What was Let Her Out?
Oh my God, you really didn't like that, did you? No,
I really didn't like that. No, it was the last film on the first night, and it's it's sort of. It's this thing about this young woman who sort of starts having these kind of blackouts, and she seems to be taken over by this sort of conjoined twin that she never knew she had. It's one of those type stories, but and it does build to like it has two good scenes, which is kind of frustrating, but the rest of it is so utterly tedious, and the acting and scripting is just it's full of the most sort of expositional kind of rubbishy dialogue, and I wasn't a fan of it at all. So I would say to avoid that one.
Okay, and Keith?
Yeah, well, for me, for Heaven, it's a real toss-up between Director's Cut or Train to Busan, but I'm guessing if I had to pick one, I'd probably say Train to Busan, for a more sort of general audience enjoyment. Director's Cut was a bit geeky, and there were a few things that, I appreciated in that.
But, I mean, come on, we've been doing this for over a year. Our picks for Movie Heaven are always a personal choice, so... Yeah.
No, but Train to Busan, I think, it really worked because that was really emotional. I mean, they're two very different movies. Director's Cut's very amusing. Train to Busan is very moving. So, but yeah, Train to Busan, I would think, is probably the strongest one. I'm just trying to think in terms of movie hell. I didn't particularly enjoy there was a film called The Chamber, which was this sort of claustrophobic film set in a submersible exploration vehicle, which is sent to do something. I really appreciated the confined nature of it, and the whole sort of premise and idea of it. I didn't particularly like the execution of it. I don't know what it was. A lot of people really enjoyed it, but for me, I just thought the script was massively corny, and I just thought the acting was appalling in this. So I don't know whether I'm being unfair and I just saw it in the wrong mood. It was an opening film on one day, so I was probably a bit tired, but I did enjoy it.
I did enjoy it. To put sort of counter to that. I think I thought the claustrophobic thing worked well. I thought it made sort of tense throughout. It made me laugh. I think you can tell you've got English actors playing Americans in it, and you can tell. And some of the dialogue was a little bit sort of from the like we've watched Aliens and we're just going to do that sort of playbook. It's not a perfect film, but for me it worked in terms of what it was trying to do.
So you said it made you laugh. I don't think it was supposed to make you laugh.
That's
what I think was wrong.
I wasn't laughing throughout. There was one bit in particular where she where the sort of the lead female character dislocates someone's shoulder, which made me laugh because it was quite. It was quite amusing.
She told them to stop being a baby, which I thought was terrible. But there you go.
I thought that was funny, there we go.
And also that the Master Cleanse didn't really deliver for me either. Do you remember that one?
I do. Again, I like that one. So there we go.
There you go. But it was. I think I avoided the worst one though, which is the one you mentioned, Simon, because everybody said that was awful. So.
Oh, lucky me! It kind of put me off from seeing any more films. To tell the truth, I was thinking I was having a much more enjoyable time in the pub than watching films. That's
a shame. But I mean, for me personally, watching a bad film at FrightFest, if you're going to watch a bad horror movie, it's better to do it in good company. And some of my best FrightFest experiences have been watching appalling movies where everyone's laughing at the same things. The rubbishy dialogue, the appalling acting, the incredibly ham-fisted attempts at sort of at winking at the audience and showing us that they've seen a couple of horror movies. There's a couple of Uwe Boll films that I particularly enjoyed, just purely because I watched them at FrightFest, and everyone was laughing along.
Well, I mean, I know you say that, but I'm afraid, having been in those screenings where we've had a good old laugh at the film, I guess it was the audience I was sitting with didn't seem to think. They just sat there quiet and not did anything. So
sometimes bad films are just sort of boring bad, aren't they?
Yeah.
And those are the worst kinds.
Yeah.
Oh, I tell you what was a horrible reality check of how time has moved on. I saw a film, it was quite good, called The Devil's Candy. It was quite a decent film. But it had the actress Shiri Appleby in it, who I remember from the brief time that I worked at Paramount on Roswell. And at the time, she was the young teenage girl, yeah? Mm. Well, in this, she was playing the mother. And I thought, oh, my God, she can't be the mother. What? Oh, no. And it was just like a reality check. Bloody hell, 20 years has passed. What happened?
I know, but she's
still lovely, though.
She was probably in her late 20s when she played a teenager.
Probably. There you go. But she still looked lovely. But it was like a bloody hell, I haven't seen her in ages. And there she was playing the mother. I was like, crap, that's scary.
So are you guys looking forward to next year's festival?
Well, here's the thing. I'm going to say this on the podcast. I want to go next year to Edinburgh That's not Edinburgh, Glasgow. I could go to Edinburgh. There wouldn't be anything on.
No, you want to go to Edinburgh?
I want to go to Glasgow to the FrightFest there, because that's in like February, I think.
That's right.
I just think I'm going to suggest to a group of the people I know, regulars, about possibly doing it as a trip, because I've heard that that's much more like the old school FrightFest before I even went, where it was in one venue over 3 days. And I just kind of fancy that as a change. I don't know how anybody else feels about that, but I'm thinking of FrightFest Glasgow next year.
Well, I'd love to do it. It just depends on what my financial situation is like at the time, because it is a case of, going up, traveling up there and accommodation and buying the ticket and stuff. So if I'm in a good way, then I will accompany you.
Yeah, could be fun. But again, yeah, I'll probably go next year wherever it ends up, in London, whether it's, I don't know whether they're going to go back to Shepherd's Bush or back to Leicester Square. I've no idea.
Well, I think the plan was that they were doing 2 years at Shepherd's Bush, because whatever renovations they're doing at the View in Leicester Square was going to take that long.
Right.
What about yourself, Clive? Are you looking forward to FrightFest next year?
Well, I always look forward to the next FrightFest, but there are other FrightFest related stuff to look forward to. There's the Halloween All Nighter, which is on the 22nd of October this year, I think.
Yeah, there's no details of that yet. I looked today, but there's nothing up about that yet.
True, but then it's one of those things which you very much have to sort of book like blind, not necessarily knowing what the lineup is. I think often, and the organisers dropped some heavy hints that there would be a special event in January, which they couldn't yet announce. So,
okay.
Keep your eye on the website, and you can sort of sign up to their sort of mailing list, because they do put out sort of regular newsletters and things. And there's a really great sort of FrightFest Facebook page. There's forums. There's the whole bit. So there is a community you can plug into if you're curious, and it's very welcoming. We always want to get new people along. Sort of, because there are still sort of people who love horror movies, love the genre, don't even know it exists. So it's great, sort of always see new faces there.
It's getting bigger every year. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good place to end it. So, Clive, for our audiences, where's the best place to find your work?
Well, if you're interested in listening to hear me talk more, I don't know why you would be, but because you said it like an hour of this or whatever, you can go to the A to Z of SFF to listen to the podcast I do with Mr. Rob Wickings, who's also guested on this fine podcast before, and where we talk about various science fiction and fantasy bits of media, whether that's film, TV, books, comics, the whole shebang, and we run the gamut from A to Z. So as the title suggests, you can also check out some of my work as a filmmaker. If you go to Vimeo and search for Clive Ashenden, you'll find some of my more recent stuff there. And
Keith, where can we find your work?
Yeah, simply go to YouTube and put in British Eyles, spelled Eyles, as in my last name. And there's some short films that I've made on there. And I'm going to continue to obviously try and get the latest film into festivals. And I will make announcements on this podcast if I get any success.
And as always, you can find my work at independentrunnings.com. Also, if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can check out my first feature film, Blood and Roses. It's available in the UK, US, Japan, and Germany. So just search for Blood and Roses.
Woohoo! That sounds cool. I like it. Amazon Prime, yeah.
You can check out this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube, and all good podcast providers. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Movie Heaven, Movie Hell. And if you're on iTunes or Stitcher, please leave us a rating and a review. So that just leaves me to say thank you, Clive, for joining us to talk about FrightFest.
It's been my pleasure. I love going to FrightFest. Love talking about FrightFest, and it's always good to be on the podcast. We'll just say thank you to Paul, Ian, Greg, and Alan, the organisers of FrightFest, they do fantastic stuff every year. So, and here's the next one.
Yeah, and sorry if there's anyone I didn't mention, but great seeing you guys.
And maybe next year I'll be attending.
Yay!
Yay!
Get your ass there.
Get my ass to Mars. Yes. And thank you, the listener, for joining us for this episode. And join us again next week, where we finish off celebrating the 50th anniversary of Star Trek.
With Clive again. Yes.
And Rob.
And Rob Wickens. Yay! Woo!
So
Woo!
we'll
Kirk!
see.
Kirk!
Khan! Spock!
Good night, Jim.
We'll see you then.
Good night, Bones.